You're like a breath of fresh air, softly blowing spring through your hair. Sunlight in the sky on your face, bringing joy and love to this place. You bring joy and love to this place in my heart. You bring joy and love to this place in my heart. You bring joy and love to this place in my heart. You bring joy and love to this place in my heart.
Hello, I'm Karol V. Brown Jones, and welcome to GG United by Love, our home for practicing love in actions. That's with the S on the end, by choosing love in every action. GG stands for grandmothers and their girls, and that includes daughters, daughter in laws, granddaughters, grandsons too, your family and your friends. If you're here, you belong here, and you are welcome. This is where we gather to share stories, wisdom, and reflections about life, love, and legacy across generations. If this speaks to your heart, I invite you to subscribe here on Substack and stay connected with our community. I am glad you're here. I'm happy to introduce to you my next guest. Today we have Reverend Diane Carolyn Robertson. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. You are the minister of Seattle Unity.
Yeah,
I understand that
Seattle Unity.
fairly new position for you, the senior minister.
Well, I've been part of the community for 28 years.
Okay.
And so I served in a number of different volunteer roles and then joined the staff in 2014. And uh, my job title changed every year, or more accurately, I had additional job titles added each year. But this year, I just newly stepped into the senior minister role. So I'm grateful for this community.
Oh, great. Congratulations. So tell us about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in California.
Mhm.
So my mom, who was named Carolyn or Carol, she was a California gal. And then my dad was Canadian, actually from Ontario, Canada. And so he made his way out there, and I grew up there and loved it. But now I've been in the Pacific Northwest since 1997, and
Mhm.
consider this home.
Great, beautiful. And in Seattle area all the time, or have you been in different parts of this area? Mostly in Seattle.
In Seattle. Yeah, I came up here to go to graduate school at UW, University of Washington, and just stayed afterwards.
What did you study in graduate school?
Environmental and civil engineering.
Ah, was that your career? Engineering?
Yes, one of my careers. Yeah, so I started in engineering and got into some healing work after that, and then made my way to ministry, even though ministry was always in my mind from childhood.
Okay, beautiful. I was getting ready to ask, what did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Well, I wanted to be everything. I remember this. I remember one conversation in particular with my mom, because I had about a dozen different things I wanted to be when I grew up. And I remember her talking to me about, well, maybe some things, could be a hobby. And for example, I really wanted to be a chef. And she said, well, maybe that's one thing you could be, sort of as a hobby, and it doesn't need to be a career. So she was wonderful in helping sort of guide me. Um,
Yeah, that's wise to let our young people know, you can do things, doesn't have to make money off of it just because you enjoy doing it. That's very wise advice.
yeah, and I think now, a lot of young people, it's just the norm that this idea that you're going to do something for 30, 40, 50 years just isn't typical anymore. So I think it kind of opens up new opportunities. Maybe it's more challenging for our young folks, but it also, I think, opens up new opportunities too.
Right, and they think differently than we did. I
Yeah.
recall someone telling me about their nephew who excellent student all the way through school and got a degree and everything, had a wonderful internship with the possible great job, but he and his girlfriend, they just do Uber stuff, Uber delivery,
Hmm.
stuff like that. That's that they just chose to do. I don't know if they still are, but they were doing it for a while. Like, hey, let's just do something easy without obligations, or maybe we don't want to be stuck in a job for many, many years, which probably is not going to happen anyway anymore.
Yeah, but the freedom that comes with that, I can see the appeal of that, right?
Right, right. And there are a lot of things they can do now. The pandemic just with us using internet for everything, it really opened up the door for careers from working from home.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about when you said when you were young, one of them, the things you wanted to do was be in the ministry.
Yeah, it was always sort of present. Even as a young child, I love talking about God and spiritual topics. And my mom was one of my best spiritual buddies. So we would take classes at church together and read books and talk about all things spiritual. So it was always this central, really foundational part of my life. But I had this really clear thought as a young teen of I'm going to go do other things first, and then I'll get to the ministry thing later. And it was just it's interesting that it's sort of part of my family DNA as well, because my mom's mom, my grandma on that side, she was a spiritual leader in her particular faith tradition. And then my dad's dad, my grandpa, who I never met, he was a Baptist minister. So I
Mm,
feel like there were sort of these DNA roots kind of in spirituality and religion and faith traditions.
right. The DNA was there, passed it on. So did you grow up in unity?
I did, yeah, which is very rare.
It's very rare, you said.
Yeah, it's very rare. Most people find unity later.
Mhm,
They kind of come from maybe either come from a different Christian tradition or Catholicism. I think we're unique on the West Coast, and unity centers on the West Coast, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is we tend to get this interesting mix of folks that have grown up in a particular religion like Christianity or Catholicism. But we also get the spiritual, not religious. So people that don't identify with a particular religion. And so it really feels like this interesting sort of intersection and melting pot of different paths, spiritual paths or religious paths.
So how is it different in other areas? What is it?
Um, Maybe in the South or Midwest, you might get more of that, but some of those unity centers, I think, are a little more Bible based, so they might attract a kind of a larger, formerly Christian, Catholic kind of faith tradition. People that have been part of the faith tradition of Catholicism or evangelical Christianity.
Hmm. How about the young people? I've spoken at Olympia, Unity of Olympia, and
Hmm.
Unity of South Sound, and I don't see very many young people. How about
Mm-mm.
Unity of Seattle?
It's been sort of cyclical. I'd say we still have kind of older folks as, our average age probably leans older. We do have younger people. Um, I don't know if part of it is, uh, people tend to find unity later in life,
Hmm.
after they've explored other traditions. I don't
Yes.
know if that's part of the, one factor.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I've heard of Unity since I've been doing Harriet Tubman for years, 25 years, over 25.
Hmm.
And opportunities to speak, people would suggest, oh, check with the Unity Church. They're pretty open to inviting people in as guest speakers. But it wasn't until last spring that I really
Hmm.
reached out. The Unity,
Hmm.
Reverend Terry was so inviting, and she pretty much got me started. So her challenge was, do you know what unity stands for and all about? So I hadn't really known. So I had to start learning, and I understand the concept, and I am drawn to it. And I realized what I've been writing in my books pretty much is follow along with the unity, understanding, and truth of all of us united, and all of us
Mm-hmm.
are part of God and Spirit and those things. And so, yeah, I understand coming into unity at a later age. Or,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, tell us a little bit about Seattle Unity. What type of things do you all do in the community?
So Seattle Unity, we obviously we just had a major ministerial change. Reverend Karen had been a minister there for 35 years,
Mm,
and we did a huge building project, and we moved into our new building in 2022. We had our old building there since the late 1950s, and it no longer really served kind of a more vibrant community. And that was part of kind of looking at the next, 50, 100 years is how do we connect with younger people
hmm.
and make it more of a community center that is inviting and welcoming to kind of a larger community.
Yeah,
And that was a primary goal in sort of the new building project. And so we have a number of different spirit groups and classes and workshops. We have men's group and uh, women's group and fiber arts. But I think a new, really vibrant group that just started late last year was called the Risers. So based on 1 Million Rising and really focused on human rights and kind of just speaking to what's happening in our world right now, and especially in our country, but doing it with the intention of having a spiritual foundation.
that's great. That's needed. So, rise,
Yeah.
million rising. So you're reaching out to encourage people to be a part of this mission, this movement.
Yeah, so 1 Million Rising was a kind of larger national organization. And
Oh,
so our group at Seattle Unity kind of based this smaller group on that organization's work, but kind of shortened it since 1 Million Rising is no longer active as a national organization. The Seattle Unity Group just shortened it to Risers. So,
okay.
yeah.
That's great. What is that new? So they haven't really done much yet, or what are they doing in the community?
It's everything from making calls and writing letters to representatives, to going out to protests, to looking at how to stand up for less fortunate, our neighbors. And so we have had a long tradition of kind of an outreach group, but that's been more about raising funds for different nonprofits and organizations in the community, whereas the risers are more about going out and taking actions as a
Mm,
group.
right. So I'm actually introducing unity to some people who have really don't know anything about unity. Can you give us a little history of the unity and what they believe,
Yeah,
what unity teaches?
yeah, it's there. I'll actually start with, as a common saying, and it's used in a lot of different circles, not just in unity, but if you've been to one unity church, you've been to one unity church or spiritual center.
Okay.
So I'll actually preface it with that there
Okay.
it takes on the flavor of the spiritual leader or minister, as well as the geographical area and the history. But Unity's roots are really kind of multifaceted. It kind of took shape around the larger New Thought movement, which really started in the late 1800s and was influenced by transcendentalists and the power of thinking. I like to say that unity was sort of the kind of the predecessor or the kind of ancestor of the personal development movement. So the power of positive thinking and heal your body by healing your mind. And some of that kind of took hold in the more secular world, really that's a lot of the roots of Unity. And so the co-founders of Unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they were husband and wife, and Myrtle had a powerful healing, physical healing. And then her husband, that was a common sense businessman, he got curious and he said, I want to know more about this prayer and meditation and working with this power of God. And so they really explored a lot of different religions and faith traditions. You know, they were exploring writings from Hinduism and other traditions, Paramahansa Yogananda. But I think that ultimately they kind of settled with Christianity as sort of their roots and language with some significant differences. So, and sometimes you'll heard it talked about as, you know, our five principles. So there is one power and one presence. You know, there isn't some power other than God, and the power of prayer and meditation, and that we are all part of that one power and one presence, that all people are sacred and divine and holy. And so I think that's our most foundational principles. And I think it also speaks to, like you said at the beginning, something that you find as a common thread in kind of other teachings as well. You know, I often think there's similarities with Taoism, that idea of oneness and flow.
Right. In my book, my newest book, Get on Board the New Underground Railroad,
Mm-hmm.
I compare all the different religions and to bring it down to all of us are teaching love God, love each other, uh, be kind. No one's teaching hate each other. These all values are, you know, one creator, love and kindness are the heart for everything. Forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
healing is sacred. Helping others is a calling. Quiet time, prayer, or meditation keeps us connected. Honesty and fairness matters. Unity and connections are everyone's birthright. If we get through all the uh, ceremonies,
Mm-hmm.
we all believe in being good people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the unity. I had started meditating years ago, thanks to Oprah and Deepak Chopra. They started
Mm-hmm.
years ago, but I always liked what he always stopped with Namaste, and
Mm-hmm.
so to get to understand what that meant. And there is a song we used to sing in church, "The God in me loves the God in you." So it's in there. We just think of it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just come at it, you know, with different perspectives and viewpoints. And I really believe that the majority of people still are good intentioned, good-hearted, you know, want the best, you know, for each other. So some might argue with me, but I still hold that as as true.
Well, I agree with you. The majority of people, even those that we don't agree with, if we get down to the spirit,
Hmm.
they still have the goodness inside. It just may be not rising up right now.
No, yeah, I'd say that's what I think is that sometimes it's clouded, that goodness exists, right? I do believe in that principle, but is there an awareness? Is there kind of an awareness of the value of each person, right? And not acting out of some place of misunderstanding or ignorance.
Right. I agree. Yes. So tell us a little bit more about your career before you as a minister.
Um, so I did work in engineering for quite a while, mostly in water, wastewater, doing computer modeling. But my graduate project was building a computer model of the Nile River to be used as a negotiation tool for the 10 countries that shared that. So I guess even when I was in engineering in a very technical field, I still was always fascinated by the human aspect. And so negotiations and mediation was always great interest to me. And so I was coming at it, looking at how these technical tools could be used to mediate and bring people together and find common ground.
That's interesting. A computer analysis. Did you say analysis or what did you say of the
A computer model is
model?
like a computer model that would kind of model the Nile River and the different resources, water resources along the Nile River, and how the countries sharing that resource could cooperatively manage that water resource.
So did you work for an international company?
Well, the project was funded by the World Bank. I was doing it as part of my graduate work,
Oh,
but it was the World Bank that was funding the work.
and
So,
did anyone use your study? Anybody actually pay attention to it?
I didn't. I was naive going into it, and when my professor and advisor, when he and I went to Washington D.C. to kind of present just a first iteration of the model, there was another professor that did a lot of work, I guess, for the World Bank and really just sort of tore into it. It was really critical.
Oh,
I didn't understand sort of the political kind of maneuvering and game that happened, for grants and funding and all that between different colleges. So I was definitely entering in a little naive on that front. But I came to graduate school from the Peace Corps. And so I think that's what, my advisor had wanted me to connect to this project and really wanted me on this project because I had served in the Peace Corps in Swaziland in Southern Africa. And so I really, in that sense, there was a little bit of a continuation of just wanting to serve kind of outside of the US and maybe look a little bit more broadly.
hmm. It had to be an interesting time.
Yeah, I always say those 2 years was like a lifetime within a lifetime. And I really think everybody should go and like live overseas for at least 6 months, if not longer, just because I think it opens our eyes to so much of what is going on in the world. It's also very educational in terms of how other countries and other people perceive the US. I learned things about our US government and living overseas that I never would have found out about here. So it
Mm.
just kind of opens up our perspective.
Yeah, it does. Anytime, even if you can't live overseas, just to be in another country and talk to people about how they view the United States is eye-opening.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what they hear and what they um, all what they hear is it depends on what we put out pretty much what our news and our government what it puts out and not so much well now these days I can take that back. We're connected on social media with people all over the world, so you do
Mhm.
get a little bit more viewpoint, but then you can't depend on social media either to give an accurate picture of what's living in the United States is like.
Right. And then the unknown of what's getting filtered and actually fed to us through social media. I think we have to be discerning and sort of actively kind of going to look at where we're getting information. So,
That's definitely true because the algorithm, once you take a peek, you're going to be
mhm.
peeping and looking and keep coming at you with the same information over and over again. So yeah, it has changed our lives. We have to be a little more careful about what we listen to and watch, and yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's spread into our minds. I was um, perusing your website for some of your sermons, and you were talking about abundance as you
Mhm.
came from a conference, and you mentioned Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman. Tell us
Yeah.
Black history of the Unity Church.
Like any human organization, and like every human being, we all have our shadow, and Unity for sure has its shadow. There was racism and Unity, for many decades, and uh, Reverend Johnny Coleman, she was, I think, on that frontier of kind of breaking through that and calling it out, right? Calling out the ignorance and unawareness that we
Mm,
were talking about earlier. And then Ruth Mosley later came along, and so many others, just this lineage of people that have been powerful change makers. And unity needed that change. We were not, as a movement, unity was not living into its principles of oneness. And so Reverend Johnny Coleman was a powerhouse, and she had her own personal healing, and that's what brought her to unity in the first place and studying these unity teachings. And then after being on the grounds and realizing that unity was not in alignment with its principles, its actions were not in alignment with its principles, she called that out. And there was small change, and then others came along and kept building on that change. So it's something that I think it's important that we always know our history. I think sometimes there's an effort, either individually and collectively, that we don't want to look at kind of the shadow and kind of the negative history that we have individually or collectively. But I think that's the only way that we grow and continue to, grow our awareness and be aware of the places where we are falling short and how we can continue to do better and live into these principles we were talking about of really honoring all people and holding all people as sacred and worthy.
right, beautiful. So just can you share a little bit of story about her? You did in your sermon that how what her legacy is.
Yes, so she was studying, she came because she had a terminal illness, and so she moved to the area around Lee's Summit, which is near Kansas City, and Unity Village was where ministerial students were training. And so when she first got there and she started studies, she was not allowed to stay on the grounds
Hmm.
because she was Black. And so she was commuting from Kansas City to the village, and that was like a 30-minute commute. And then finally one day, in a storm, her car broke down and she had just had it. And so she, along with her classmates at the time, kind of demanded that she get lodging on the grounds of Unity. Now, mind you, it was still separate. So it was just one small step that then further steps would be taken by others. But she had her personal healing, and then she became aware that she was really called to kind of this much greater purpose and mission, and that was in that moment calling unity to live and express more in its principles, by being welcoming to all people regardless of race and color. And there's a lot more stories about her. Later there was a kind of reconciliation ceremony with Johnny Coleman and Unity. She did go on to start her own kind of school, uh, and so UBL. So you'll see a lot of UBL teachers and instructors. And she started a couple of churches, kind of really one was the first mega church before mega churches were even a thing. And so she was in Ebony magazine, and she was in Forbes magazine. She was like known as a change maker and a businesswoman beyond just being an incredible minister and leader as well.
Oh, thank you. See, Black history, so often people only learn about the ones that made, big name people. And there's so
Yeah.
many people that have contributed to not just this country, but just to their community or their family that needs to be remembered. I
Mm-hmm.
saw she was born in 1920, so this is quite a time ago when she was going through these experiences with the segregation. So it's
Yeah.
beautiful to hear
And
the
she
story.
was facing it with such a courage. And Ruth Mosley, who also was a Unity minister and started the Unity Urban Ministerial School, she was also a change maker, and she called out ways that Unity could keep doing better. And then she brought that into a different way of doing education. And Unity Urban Ministerial School is one of the first kind of online formats for ministers to study. And so we have this legacy of so many that have contributed. And you're right, we hear so much about, the Malcolm X and MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., and their stories are powerful and important, but there's so many other stories of so many that also, we can learn from and should hear about.
From all cultures too. Right,
Yeah.
right. So you said UBL, what's that stand for?
Universal Foundation for Better Living.
Okay, thank
Yeah, so she started, it's like a cousin to Unity. It's under the larger New Thought umbrella.
you. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, what else would you like to share with us today?
Well, I kind of wanted to share because we're kind of in this talking about kind of Black History Month and kind of how we grow awareness, including of those that maybe we don't know as much about, or maybe their stories that we don't know as much about. And I recently became aware of how my kind of family story kind of intersected with Harriet Tubman's story and journey.
Oh, really?
And so my dad, being Canadian, all his family kind of lives back in Ontario, Canada. And
Mm,
so every, 3 or 4 years, we take trips as a family from California to Ontario, Canada, and especially around the area of St. Catharines
mm-hmm.
and Niagara on the Lake.
Yes.
And it was only recently that I was up there visiting my Aunt Mary and my cousins, and we were driving by this little church, and it was where Harriet Tubman was recognized. And I'm like, well, how is it that I didn't know of this before after all these years? And we came here, and there's so much rich history here, and so since that time, it's really opened my eyes to a few different things, but one of just doing my own learning about Harriet Tubman and her legacy and that history, but how it was placed in a certain geographical place that didn't have a lot of awareness, even with the people living in that place decades later. And so I don't know that there's anything I'm going to do beyond just my own learning and understanding, but I just thought it was interesting that in Little St. Catharines that I, would visit every few years and my aunts and cousins lived in, this was kind of a center for Harriet Tubman's legacy and work. And it was like, it caught me off guard. It was a lovely surprise and then also a little sad that I hadn't known about it before in all my visits there, that it was never part of, my family sharing that legacy and what was right there next to us.
Well, sometimes people can live in the area for years and years and years and not realize the history
Mm-hmm.
that is significant connected to someone that they've heard about before. Yes, Harriet had to take people to St. Catherine's because of the fugitive slave law of 1850,
Mm-hmm.
where anywhere in the United States, even though you were free, you could be taken back into slavery. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was that was the way to guarantee that the people that she had led to freedom would remain free. So they could go to Canada. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
St. Catherine. I haven't been there yet, so that's on my list to go to, yeah, and visit that church. And you are doing something else. You're allowing me to come and share Harriet Tubman at University of Seattle in April.
End of April, I think.
April,
Yeah.
April
Yeah.
26th. Yep. And so I appreciate that. And
Mm-hmm.
like I was saying, when I start writing about Harriet Tubman, all my books are teaching servant leadership, love, and how to leave a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone can do that if they just realize that you all have something to contribute. We all need to love ourselves first so that we can give out. And so Harriet's story broken down into So I have the first book is 30 Lessons, Love, Leadership, and Legacy. I got a little uh,
Mhm.
uh,
That's great.
there. So I'll just read it. Things like keep the spirit of a leader, overcome negative past experiences, have a support system, realize your goals with others. If you look at her story, she could not be happy being free, knowing that her people were enslaved, still enslaved and suffering. So she had to
Mhm.
go back. Dedicate your passion, dedicate your life to your passion. Listen and learn. I love to use that one with kids
Mhm.
because she couldn't read or write, but she listened and she was very wise and she knew how to navigate in the woods because she listened to her father, who was a lumberman, right? But
Mhm.
after she got free, she was in homes of abolitionists who were
Mhm.
doctors and lawyers and educators and professors, and she didn't know the language they were speaking, but she
Mhm.
listened and asked questions. And so she began to understand a little bit about the politics. That's another one. Learn a little politics of the time and how. Um, so, yeah, there's so much we can learn from Harriet other than what she did actually on the Underground Railroad, all the life that this woman who lived to be 92, 93 years old lived. It
Mhm.
has a lot of lessons there. So I love
Yeah.
the opportunity to come and show her spiritual side along with her legacy of saving other people.
Well, I'm excited for us to be able to host you at Seattle Unity, and very much looking forward to having you as our guest speaker for our Sunday service and for the workshop.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So I always appreciate when we can share what's going on in the community. I've found that I'm doing a lot of people locally, but I also interview people in other parts of the country. But for our local people to know what's available to them. So where are you located?
Seattle Unity is down in a neighborhood in Seattle called South Lake Union.
Uh,
So it's right by Denny Park, which is the oldest park in Seattle. And we're just a couple blocks from the Space Needle. So we actually have a view of the Space Needle from the rooftop of our church. It's a beautiful space. And so I hope people will come and check us out and invite people to join us.
Definitely, definitely. So I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy lady. And any closing comments before we close our conversation?
Only that this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed having a conversation with you and excited again to hear more from you. End of April.
In the April. Yes, I will make sure that we are advertising it so we can maybe get some guests there.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Mhm. I welcome you to listen to this presentation. And if you are in the Seattle, Washington area, I would just love to see you in the audience at Seattle Unity. I will be there for the Sunday morning service. I will be the one presenting. I won't call it a sermon, but I will be the guest speaker for that Sunday morning. And that Sunday is going to be April 26th. So the information here, and also you can always Google it. I thank you for this opportunity for to give you some information about things you may not know about. As I said, realize that my belief system and what I've been teaching follows along with the Unity Church, but it also follows along with all other churches because I believe that we are here to unify in love, love ourselves, and love each other. That's what it's all about. If you do appreciate the conversations I have with my guests, please do subscribe, share, and I would love your comments. I have no idea what you're thinking out there. If you're on my YouTube channel, please do subscribe. and leave a comment. If you're on Substack, you're welcome to join my Substack community, and you'll get a free ebook of this book. That way, you are ready to have more conversation about how we all can get on board the new Underground Railroad. Because Harriet Tubman's spirit is calling us, guiding us to love in actions. Thank you for joining with me today, and we'll see you next week.